We want to really start talking about men. In society, we've seen the rise of the beta male, which to me serves absolutely no purpose. How are we able to turn this ship around, in your opinion?
Well, the first thing is to identify what it is to be a man, what it is to be called to follow in God's guidance and leadership, to be a God-led husband and a father, and to build a family and to bring the Lord into your home and run your family, run your home in accordance with what the Word says. Our society and how this beta male narrative stuff has come in has reshaped the way men think about themselves. The one thing I loved about Charlie and still love about him is how he led with his faith on his sleeve, because he challenged a lot of people and he brought a lot of truth to conversation that people needed to hear, whether they agreed with him or not.
Welcome to today's show. I'm so excited to have you here, Josh. You are the founder of Valor Men's Coaching, and you are the host of the Valor Men's podcast, where you are helping men get through the trials and tribulations that they face in everyday life, relationships, and you have a very strong faith that props up how you operate in your business. So today we want to get behind the scenes of how you've become as successful as you are. But before we get into that, we want to really start talking about men and what it is that you do. So I'm going to dive right on in. Tell us a little bit about how you structure this. How are men finding you, and what are you seeing as the most common struggles across the board? Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Really looking forward to the conversation. So typically men are finding me through a lot of referrals. So I've helped a lot of men over the course of the last 7 to 8 years. So a lot of referrals. And then, these days, I believe men are looking for somebody to lean on, somebody to pour their hearts out to, somebody to have some transparency with. So men have been coming to me through some social media outlets, connections through churches, things of that nature, some other, people that I've partnered with. But there's a huge need for men to have a safe place to go lean into, and thankfully I've been blessed to become that for a lot of guys.
I love that. So when you first sit down with a man, what are some of the red flags that you can notice if they're stuck in a path of maybe a destructive relationship or a destructive cycle, or perhaps a toxic relationship? Because I do know that relationships are a huge, I would say, pain point of something that you're working on.
Yeah, it's one of the pillars that I coach in addition to fear and anxiety. They kind of all lump together. There are other aspects of Valor Men's Coaching that address other areas, but me specifically, yes, toxic relationships. So one of the very first things that I will do when sitting down with a guy who comes to me, and the first thing we do is, as a consult, to identify some of these areas, some of these problem areas, talk about goals, what they're processing through. And the very first thing that I take a look at is their past. Tell me about your childhood. Telling me about, any of the traumas that have taken place back there. We kind of relay the train tracks, so to speak, is what I tell them. Because where somebody is right now, how they see themselves, how they navigate through relationships is predicated on a learned behavior, in my opinion, generational patterns. So a lot of men that come to me who've come from multiple divorced families generally have broken relationship patterns in their past. So we go back from the beginning, peel the onion back there, again, relay the train tracks, and have that pattern make sense to them. Because most men will look at things topically, like, where am I at right now? I got to fix right now. Well, before we can fix right now, we got to go back and figure out how we got here. So that's the biggest piece. And then you mentioned like a marker for what a toxic relationship might consist of. Well, like, what's in place there? The biggest thing that I am seeing right now is accountability. There is a fear for accountability, because if I take accountability, that means that I am wrong somehow, and that the person that I'm in the relationship with is right. And that's just the opposite. So accountability, ownership, and then regarding, wherever they're at in their faith, we dig into that as well, and kind of pulling together what God has deemed what a healthy relationship should look like.
So for the ones that are coming from, you find out they have kind of that toxic background, maybe they're coming from divorce or some type of a trauma. What's the first step that you're giving them?
So we just need to understand it. First off, we need to go back, and let's just say that they come from, a situation where their parents had multiple divorces. Maybe they were married before they got married and had, him as a child. And then there was divorces after the fact. First thing we need to understand is just people are broken. People come from their own traumas that they bring into their current relationships and so on and so forth. That's why we tackle so heavily the generational patterns, because it just gets carried on, and people exist in this environment where they're like, oh, well, my parents were like that. I guess that's just my thing in life. I guess that's just the way I am. That's just how my family does it. So that's the first thing, is we understand that people have brought these patterns into the current. And if you don't change or learn what happened to you in the past, your current will be, your kid's current, things of that nature. So that's generally the first place.
So in society, we've seen the rise of the beta male, which to me serves absolutely no purpose. I don't think they don't bring a lot of value in a lot of different arenas, in my opinion, as a female. But how can we empower men to channel the masculine energy and lead their households? How are we able to turn this ship around, in your opinion?
Well, the first thing is to identify where this beta male push is coming from. I believe it is a very agenda-driven narrative that the world is pushing to demasculize men out of what their original calling is. God called us to be men, to step into manhood, to lead, to be husbands and fathers, and to lead their household. The culture and society that we live in right now is labeling that as toxic masculinity, that should shift, that there should be an equal. And this isn't to say that anybody's less important than the other, but God deemed men to lead. And, how do we change the current on that? Well, first off, we look to our Creator. We look to His perfect plan and identify that is not outdated. It was never flawed and never will be flawed. The same things that have happened in the past are happening now. They're just on a different kind of recycle. So looking to God to understand what that plan looks like, and how people should structure their lives, and how they should lead as men, and not be ashamed for doing it, regardless of what culture, regardless of what social media says, regardless of what your neighbor might have an opinion on, or friend that may think they know everything about everything. Look to your Creator, look to God for that guidance and that compass.
But what if you're not religious? How can we save those men and help them channel their masculinity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to start to look at, what is their moral compass made up of? What is their, the fabric of who they are as men? Let's start simply. You can take the faith and the religious component, put it off to the side, and say, you can look back at just men in general are meant to lead. Even if you take the God component out of it, men innately have a leadership mentality. They have their general being is made up of being a protector, being a leader. So just in those core components, society and culture has tried to demean. I mean, the faith piece of it, brought into that amplifies it, 100-fold. But just that piece of it alone is something men can anchor themselves to. Also, taking a look at, again, how they were parented, how they've been influenced, the people that they're in relationship with, where they get influenced by, because a lot of this stuff happens while in relationship. Their significant other will bring in some of these ideas and try to label them as, toxic, or, making them feel good about being a beta male, basically. So it starts at the core of who men are in general.
So then, speaking on that, how do you help men in general kind of untangle the spiritual obligation versus self-preservation and working on themselves? How do we help them?
Yeah, so first off, it goes back to, their patterns, their experiences. I need to be able to, as a coach, I need to understand what they've been through.
Yeah.
Because everything, our experiences, they culminate, they bring together a kind of a present identity almost. If somebody's rooted in their faith, we will touch on where their identity is rooted in the Lord. If that's not a part of the equation, which I coach men in both circumstances, we will just take a look at, again, I go back to who they innately are at their core, who they're just normally, I guess, just their natural presence is to lead and to to not be fearful, to not cower behind a label, so to speak. The world is full of labels. So men have been I would say demonized in a lot of ways, and the first thing is to acknowledge that's going on, making them aware, because a lot of men that come to me, they're like, well, I heard this and I'm being told this by my significant other. Do you believe that about yourself? Well, no. Well, where's it coming from? Well, you heard it so and so and they said it on here. So it's weeding through all of the lies and getting to their root and getting back to who they are, as men, their core foundation.
So I think that a lot of men are afraid to set boundaries because they're afraid of maybe rejection or abandonment. What would you say to help, if a guy is watching this right now, how can you get better at setting boundaries so that you can step into who you truly are meant to be?
That is a huge, huge piece of the equation. So again, I reference this a lot, but I believe this all starts here. Why do you have loose boundaries? Why are you apprehensive about setting boundaries? Generally, that comes from, well, I did that in the past and it led to that. And you hit on another keyword, abandonment. Abandonment cascades across a lot of categories. Abandonment is the separation of somebody has left me in the past, somebody has walked away from me, somebody broke up with me, a parent, divorce, my parents got divorced and my mom left or my dad left. So it's this feeling of somebody leaving. So men are fearful of putting boundaries in place for the fear of that person not abiding by it, not agreeing to it, and leaving. That can happen in a romantic relationship, it can happen in a marriage, and it can happen in a friendship, a business relationship,
Absolutely.
Anything. So that's the first piece, is identifying why there's apprehension and also understanding that boundaries are healthy. It's just like if somebody's got a child and they're trying to discipline them, or discipline is good because it creates boundaries, it creates consistency and a comfort for that person. The same thing in adult relationships.
That's such a great way of putting it, because when you see kids where their parents just let them run wild and free and act like little terrors, it's not healthy, because they're going to grow up thinking that rules are just
A suggestion.
They're not actually something that we have to live by. Kendall has 2 children, and they are the most respectful, most helpful. Every time we've had to move offices, it happens to be when school is not in session. And they are carrying boxes. They are holding doors. We always reward them with something afterwards for like a job well done.
Amazing.
But I mean, just 10 out of 10. But that didn't come from you saying yes to everything.
No, they get told no more than anything.
And
Or they have to prove and earn it.
yeah.
And then there's ways that they can earn what it is. But there's boundaries, there's rules, there's this is okay, this is not. Like, we have made it clear what we expect in relation to set outcome.
Yeah.
It's intentional, structured parenting.
I love structure.
My sister's the same way, and it's an amazing thing to watch.
Okay, so if you are a man and you grew up with a toxic role model, because like you said, most of this starts not just in this moment, it started before. How do you help them kind of rewrite this story in their mind of who they truly can be? And I know that you have personally had to do this for yourself. How did you do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, in my own story, my parents had multiple divorces. They were both married before they, got married and had me, and then divorced several times and married several times after. And, my learned environment was, well, that's just how things go and people make mistakes. What I didn't understand was the level of trepidation in terms of, trusting people. Because what I knew is that if I get close to somebody, they leave. They, somebody comes into my life, well, they will soon exit at some point. So I can't get too attached. So for men, it's different for everybody. Everybody's got their own story, but in terms of toxic role models, there comes a time where you have to you have to self-evaluate, especially if they're reaching out to me. They're at a point where they know they need to make change. So if they're a person of faith, we bring that in, and that really helps clarify things that, hey, people are just broken. People are broken in different ways. They make bad mistakes, stuff that they recover from and stuff that they heal from. You can choose to make a different, or take a different path. You don't have to follow what you've been used to. You can choose something differently. And part of that is identifying with who you're following. It could be a friend, it could be a parent, it could be a relative of some kind that you're, kind of anchoring yourself to, and like, yeah, I'm going to model myself after that. Just because there's a comfort level there doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. So it's getting somebody confident. Again, we go back to boundaries and breaking those connections, and not that you have to cast somebody out of your life, but you're going to choose differently. There's a saying, you're the average of the 5 closest people you spend time with or talk to. That is a very, very true thing. And one of my big focus is helping men understand that and be comfortable with establishing, those redirections.
That's honestly, I think about that saying all the time, because we work in a very close-knit environment, and who I choose to hire, it makes an impact on our clients, but it
Absolutely.
makes an impact on Kendall. It makes an impact on me. And I want to know that we are aligned and that we're here to lift each other up. We're here to step up to the plate when we are called and we're exhausted. And, it's just one of those days that we all are there to support one another, versus somebody being like, that's not in my job description. I don't like that. I don't align with that. It's the same reason why we hire ideally faith-based conservatives who aligned in that same mission, because we want to continue to lift up people who are doing the right things in this world, right?
That's right. Amen.
We want to be able to say at the end of the day when we leave this office that we had a good, impactful day of work.
That's right.
So
Alignment.
Exactly. Alignment. I think that is so, so huge.
At PS Creative, we believe bold ideas deserve bold production. That's why we built PS Studios, now the #1 podcast production studio in the country. If you're ready to take your podcast to the next level, check us out at psstudios.co.
So we just witnessed the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And what do you believe the impacts and aftermath of this is going to be, not just on men, but of course in society and faith in general? But I would like to start with specifically on men.
I don't know that we can quantify the impact that not only he had on men while he was here, but after his passing. I believe it's going to be beyond anybody's imagination. The one thing I loved about Charlie, and still love about him, is how he led with his faith on his sleeve. He sought to go out and have conversations with people who he knew he wasn't going to agree with at all times, purposely, because he valued and appreciated open dialogue, which our world has gotten away from. If you don't, the culture would say that if you don't agree with somebody, you should cancel them or cast them out of your life, or shame them into agreeing with you.
Yeah.
So
Which is just ridiculous.
So you can feel comfortable, right? But Charlie led with what it is to be a man, what it is to be called to follow in God's guidance and leadership, to be a God-led husband and a father, and to have kids, to build a family, and to bring the Lord into your home and run your family, run your home in accordance with what the Word says. Men need to be challenged. Men need to understand, again, reintroduce what it is to be a man in this world. Because our society and how this beta male narrative stuff has come in has reshaped the way men think about themselves, the way they believe they should exist out of comfort, and just kind of laying around in their sweatpants in the basement all day, and letting letting somebody else lead on their behalf. And it was never the design. So I love and appreciate so much about what Charlie brought to the table, because he challenged a lot of people and he brought a lot of truth to conversation that people needed to hear, whether they agreed with him or not. He unapologetically led with that.
So how then, bringing that in, how has that, your faith, impacted where you are now?
Have you always been centered in your love of the Lord, or did that come later for you?
That's a great question. So I grew up in a family where, you go to church on a Sunday and you plug in, you check the box, and you're kind of good to go for the next 6 to 7 days until you do it again. And then, there wasn't a lot of relationship. There really wasn't any relationship. It was religion, going to church, checking the boxes, over relationship. And the Lord wants us to focus on a relationship with Him over religion, the have-tos, the box checking, and all of that kind of stuff. So I really didn't have, faith wasn't a part of my life. It was an accessory that kind of hung out over here whenever I needed it.
Sure.
I got into my early 20s. Story for another day, but got baptized, got led into prayer of salvation by a pastor, found the Lord. My life was never the same.
Was this when you were married, or was this before you were married?
So that was kind of in conjunction with that.
Okay.
I got led into prayer of salvation by a pastor in premarital counseling.
Okay.
Which was a huge blessing. What I heard from the Lord was, don't go through with that relationship and that commitment, because that's not what I have for you, but I'm going to bring good out of this and purpose according to me to glorify me through you finding me, through the relationship with me and getting baptized. So that was a turning point in my life. And when that marriage came to an abrupt end months later, what I heard from him was, my purpose is still going to be fulfilled here. This is a blip on the radar. You're going to be able to help other people who are going to be going through similar things. I never knew that it would exist like I've been doing, which has been a massive blessing. But my faith is the priority for me. It's not a priority. It's not part of the priority list. It's the priority. My future wife, kids, everything else will flow underneath that. And the Bible and the Word is how I run my life. It is the filter how I run my life every single day, knowing that I'm not going to do it perfectly, but the focus is on doing it as best that I can.
I love that. What moment has most tested your faith?
I would say it was in some previous relationships, and it was wanting something to work out so badly, and knowing in my gut, because the Lord speaks to me so clearly through my gut, that that's not the path that He had for me. I have, like a lot of men do, have a fixer sort of mentality in me. It never really works out.
But I think that comes from a sense of wanting to help somebody, right? I don't necessarily look at, I have the same quality. I love to fix something, but I don't necessarily look at that as a downward trait.
No, it's a good quality when purposed properly.
Yeah.
Trying to fix something that maybe the other person doesn't see needs fixing, that the Lord is clearly steering you away from, and then fighting with Him on that and staying in something and just kind of beating your head against the wall, just always comes out to the same outcome. It's what I said in the beginning is still the same at the end. So yeah, there's ways to kind of re-engineer that to be a healthy fixer mentality, but it could definitely throw you off course.
So you would say that in a relationship, that was your biggest test of faith, was being able to walk away from something that was not for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, there was 2 of those instances that I clearly heard from Him that, hey, this is not what I have for you. And when you want something to work, you feel like you're at a place in life where, like, well, this has to, because of timing, and people are off, my friends are doing this and I'm here, and you feel like you're, again, God's timing versus my timing, but abiding by the peace that He provides, regardless of the heart, the emotions, and all of the feelings that are going along on the surface. It's a greatest test of faith, and it's the most rewarding test of faith that I've ever had.
So then, using that in your coaching, how do you help men who are using their faith as a way to avoid growth? Because maybe they don't see it as following the path that they should.
So when they're not leaning on their faith necessarily?
Yeah, if they're not implementing it and using it to help them grow individually or with their partner, or maybe they need it to grow out of the relationship. How are you helping use their faith to guide them that way?
Yeah, great question. So I do coach a lot of men who kind of have their faith, it's kind of off to the side. It's not necessarily their compass and they filter everything through. It's, I believe in God, and it's more of like an off to the side. So we dig into that depending on what they have going on. If it's a relationship and there's a lot of elements going on in the relationship that are extremely toxic, that come up against principles that God has set in place to form healthy relationships according to him, we then link those things together, which helps add clarity for the guy that I'm coaching. And the more we can add clarity and eliminate all the clutter and confusion, I use this analogy a lot, and a lot of guys come to me and they're trying to fix everything on the spot. It's like throwing a bowl of confetti in the air and trying to grab all the pieces at once. Like, no, we've got to make sense of all of this. A lot of that has to do with, well, we're doing this, and this, and we have this in our relationship, and I don't know why it's not working. Well, because you're trying to do that all on your own. You're not seeking the one who created a healthy relationship. So we are able to peel all of that apart and make some sense out of it. So it's a good starting point.
Okay, I've got a off the topic. Well, it is on the topic, but it's a bit strange. Obviously, we know biblically that cheating on your spouse is not acceptable behavior. So if you are coaching a man and either he has cheated or his spouse has cheated on him, do you believe that they can save that marriage and continue onwards? Or are you coming from the side of you need to walk away?
Great question. So as long as both people have, depending on who did the cheating, if the one that did the cheating repented of that act, has gone into prayer and has gone into forgiveness, for sure. If the one who got cheated on has gone into forgiveness, then yes, there is 100% an opportunity for that marriage to be repaired. If somebody cheated because they felt like they were owed the opportunity to cheat because of something somebody else did, and they refuse to go into coaching or counseling, they feel like they feel fine in doing that because, again, of something that was done to them, then I don't know how it does work, because we don't have to forgive, we get to forgive. Now, cheating and infidelity is something very much rooted in the Bible as an avenue for kind of breaking that covenant. Mm-hmm. So again, depending on if both parties want to make something work, they absolutely can. The forgiveness and the repentance component has got to be in place. Otherwise, there's no direction, there's no compass.
That makes perfect sense. So in your personal story, what is a success that has changed everything for you, and what is a failure that has been your biggest teacher?
Well, let me start with the failure. So I will go back to not listening to my gut, not listening to the Lord. So, we always hear, well, I'm going to pray about it and then go from there. Okay, well, you pray about it and you get the direction and then you do the opposite. That's not good implementation. Yeah. I've done that countless times. It's been in relationships. It's been in job opportunities. It's been in all kinds of things. That has kept me from what God has had planned for me. I don't believe it's been anything wasted, because I believe those things will eventually be weaved back in when you're walking into discipleship. But hearing from him and then doing the opposite, or not acting on what he's told me to do, has been a failure. And then I would say, on the flip side, acting on that has been one of the greatest blessings I've ever had. And part of acting on that is what has developed into Valor Men's Coaching. I fought that for many, many years. God positioned me to help people based out of my own things, the marriage, the failed relationships, the debilitating fear and anxiety for multiple years, all of that kind of stuff. And he kept placing men in my life that I had no idea why they were coming to me, but I was able to help them. And after years of feeling like I should do something bigger and something more to help more men, people telling me I should do that, I fought it until one day I just decided to make it happen, and it all came together quickly. So it was a very clear obedience. So that has been one of the bigger things for me.
I love that.
What is your version of the American dream?
Well, I would say this: God has instilled a function, especially as a man, in us to be overcomers, to be doers, to lead, and to walk in discipleship with Him. And I would say, as long as everything is in accordance with that, especially if somebody has peace about doing something, the American dream can mean, a lot of things. But if you have a burning desire in your heart to execute on something, you have the full capability of making it happen. We live in a country where it's highly accessible, highly doable. You've got the will, grit, and determination given to you by your Creator. And it is we have the opportunity to dig in and be resourceful and implement steps to make that happen, not fall behind and let somebody hand it to us. The American dream involves grit and overcoming, in my opinion. And we have that at our fingertips.
Do you think it's still alive?
100%. More so now than it ever has been, regardless of what society and culture want to tell us.
All right, I think it's time for you to answer the question left for you from the last guest.
Okay.
If you don't know how this works, audience, the person who is on before asks and poses a question for the guest. They do not know who that guest will be. And then when Josh leaves here, he will also record a question for the next person who is in this hot seat. Okay, so the question is, what's one bad habit or belief that you still catch yourself doing?
Negative inner self-talk and thoughts of regret.
Give us a few of those.
Sure. It happens daily. So obviously, a strong person of faith, there is a God, there is an enemy. And the enemy does not want you to have any success and wants to steal, kill, and destroy it in every moment. Anything good that the Lord has you on path for, the enemy's trying to kill. And that happens through thoughts. And I tell my guys this all the time: you cannot fight thoughts with thoughts. You fight thoughts with actions, you fight thoughts with scripture. So on a daily basis, undoubtedly there is regret. All you have to do is go on social media for 10 seconds and look at people who are doing things that you think maybe you should have done prior in life or whatever. So regret is one of them. I should have launched this coaching sooner. Should have done that differently. And then what happens is you kind of spiral into this, well, there's evidence of that. There's evidence of that thought. And yeah, that happened over here. That is something that I go through on a daily basis. I think a lot of people do in various ways. Mm-hmm. Being able to repurpose that, His will versus my will, kind of erases that, gets me centered again, and says, I am exactly where I need to be in this moment.
I always say God's timing is perfect.
Always perfect. It never seems like it because we always allow our heart and our emotions and our head and our overthinking and rumination get in the way. But at the end of the day, when we decide to sit still, surrender, and walk with Him under His guidance, the timing will always be perfect.
Our final question for everybody on this show is, what does freedom mean to you?
Freedom means the ability to unapologetically go out and lead with your faith on your sleeve, to be on mission, to glorify the kingdom of heaven at every turn, and to walk in radical obedience with the Lord, affecting people in a very positive way, no matter if it's from a work standpoint or relationship standpoint, but always seeking Him in every single thing that we do.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here with us, Josh, and let everybody know where they can find you.
Absolutely. valormenscoaching.com, and you can find me on all the social medias under that as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that is all we've got today. If you would like to connect with us, it's pscreativestudios.com, and we'll catch you next time.